Okay, folks, so we'll make a start. So yeah, welcome back to week 4 of the course, towards a creative response to uncertain times. So yeah, this evening, what we're going to do is we're going to start with breakout groups, and then we're going to look at this idea of mind reactive and creative, particularly in the context of meditation. So what it means in meditation and how we can work, for example, with the mind when it is in a reactive state when we're meditating. And then we'll do some meditation, and then we'll have a break as normal for 10 minutes. After the break, we'll do a session of the Metta Bhavana, the practice we learned last week. And we're going to look at the theme of wisdom and generosity this week, what that means. And as we've done in previous weeks, we'll finish the session with setting up our home practice for the coming week. So yeah, so last week, we went away with this new meditation practice, the Metta Bhavana. And I was also encouraging you to try and give your full attention to the person that you're with, whether you're with them online or with them in person. And yeah, just to make that a practice. So to turn off your phone and just to be with that person as fully as you can. In the same way that, you know, when you're doing the mindfulness of breathing, you are trying to be with the breath as fully as you can. So in terms of the just some questions to get you going. So I'll just share a screen here. So yeah, so first of all, you might like to explore in the groups, well, how did you find the Metta Bhavana? How did the practice go for you? And if there are questions coming out of that, which hopefully there will be, please text them to me in the chat box after the group is finished or during the break, but it's an invitation to do that. Or if there's anything else for that matter that arose during the course of the week, please let me know about that as well. And then, yeah, so just reporting in with each other about how that was, the Metta Bhavana. Secondly, how was giving your full attention to the person you were speaking with? How did you find that? And anything you noticed about the practice, whether within the practice or outside of the practice, and what was challenging. Yeah, so those are some questions just to get you going. You don't have to follow them slavishly, but it's just something to get you going. Okay, folks. So I think we're all back. So yeah, so welcome back to the main room. What I want to do is just recap briefly, particularly what we learned last week. But right from the beginning, we looked at this notion of change. And how what we're trying to do, what Buddhist practice is trying to do, is to help us to live in accordance with the fact of change, which means, you could say, in essence, letting things go, but also being open to opportunities as they emerge, being able to respond to the reality of the situation that's happening right now, rather than ideas that we have about the situation, which might be based on what happened before. So what we learned, particularly in the second week, is that there's these two main tendencies that we have, these two ways that our mind, our being, can function. So the first way is a reactive way. So when we're reactive, it's as if we're resisting change. And when we're creative, we're responding to change. We're alive to it, and we're responding to it. So what we're trying to do with Buddhist practice is to make that shift, to make the shift from reactive to creative, and from creative to ever more creative. And it's not just our mind. Our mind is really crucial, but it's not just our mind that we need to look at. We also need to look at the actions that flow from our mind, the actions that give expression to what's in our mind, what's in our heart. So that's what Buddhist ethics is about, is giving some attention to action, giving some attention to what we do, and seeing how that can be an expression of reactivity or creativity. And if what we do is an expression of reactivity, will strengthen reactive patterns. If it's an expression of creativity, we'll move in the direction of liberation and the direction of genuine responsiveness. So what we saw last week was that there were 5 precepts which give some shape, 5 training principles which give some shape to that ethical practice. So the first precept is the precept of living from metta, living from loving kindness. So living with this solidarity that we have for the lives of others. And what that means as well is not harming other living beings. And we also heard about the principle of generosity, which is a sort of an outward movement of energy. So we're really looking to express the kinship that we feel with other beings by giving things to them, by giving them what they need, by responding to their needs, which means as well not taking what hasn't been freely given to us. So the third precept is the precept of stillness, simplicity, and contentment. So we looked at this in particular by reducing input, by actually reducing the stream of things that are coming into our senses and learning to develop contentment within the mind. And we saw how the other side of that is abstaining from sexual misconduct. The fourth principle is the principle of truthfulness. So this is really about giving some attention to speech and seeing how, if we really want to embody truthfulness, embody an honest appraisal of what's really going on, and an awareness of what's really going on, we need to learn to reflect what's really going on in what we say. So expressing what's true rather than expressing something which is untrue. So it means both being truthful and also abstaining from false speech. And the fifth precept is about awareness. So we practice this particularly in the first week by just bringing some attention to our body and the movements of our body. What it means, as well as that, I'll say in a minute. It also means abstaining from drink and drugs which cloud the mind. So part of the awareness that we develop, part of that fifth precept, is the awareness, the recognition of what kind of state we're in. Learning to recognize, being aware of whether we're in a reactive state or a creative state. So that's a really crucial aspect of awareness. It's not just knowing what's going on, but it's understanding the kind of mind that we have, knowing the kind of mind that we have. So we'll see what this means in a moment in particular. So what we're trying to do when we meditate is we're endeavoring to create an uninterrupted flow of creative or skillful mental states. So there's only creative states. All the reactive states have fallen away. So if we're able to develop that uninterrupted flow of creative mental states, we'll find a stability of concentration. We'll be able to actually pay attention over a period of time. We won't get distracted. There'll be an ease, there'll be an enjoyment to that, even a delight in that, a physical kind of feeling in the body of enjoyment and delight, and even ecstasy when we get really concentrated. And there'll be bliss, there'll be a deep stillness and enjoyment, and there'll be clarity of thought, so that our thoughts won't jump around in a haphazard, random, disconnected way. There'll be a kind of a flow of connected, creative, consistent thinking that will lead us deeper and deeper into whatever it is that we're giving our attention to. So when these factors come together, we enter into absorption. With the technical word for it is jhana, which is a Sanskrit word, dhyana. So it means absorption. It means all of our energy flowing together. So this is different from how we sometimes experience our mind, which is all of our energy flowing in different directions. Part of us wants to do this, part of us wants to do that. There isn't a sense of a kind of a unified engagement. So it's a little bit like two things coming together. So we start when we're absorbed, we start with this feeling that I am doing awareness of my breath. So you've got two things. You've got a sense of you doing a practice, and you've got a sense of the practice being done, a sense of you trying to be aware of your breath. And then when you become absorbed, those two things come together. So there's just a singleness of activity. There isn't that sense of a split. So it's an experience of integration of different parts of the mind, different parts of our being, different aspects of our emotional life and our impulses all coming together. So to express that, when the Buddha talks about this integration that happens with absorption, he uses a metaphor to describe it. He describes it as a little bit like soap and water being blended. So you've got soap powder and you've got water. Now, in India, in ancient India, what you'd have if you were a wealthy person, you'd have a bath attendant who would do that for you. So there's a nut that you grind that when you mix it with water, it makes soap. And they basically knead the soap powder so that it would be completely saturated with the water. And the water would be completely absorbed in the soap powder. So starting off with two things, something wet and something dry, you'd end up with one thing. You'd end up with soap powder. So it's a little bit like that with integration. It's as if all of our energies come together there, integrated. So that's, in a way, what a creative mental state looks like, or what it can be. Particularly in meditation, we can really intensify that stream of creativity. And I use the word stream because that's what the mind is like. It's not a static thing that we're trying to kind of fix our mind in or on. It's like a flow. It's like a stream. But we've got to admit that sometimes when we meditate, we don't experience this. Our concentration is not stable. We are hopping from one thing to the next. There's a sense of lack of ease, of dis-ease, of agitation. It's not enjoyable. Our mind feels kind of brittle or dry or sharp, and our thinking is confused and unclear. So this is a reactive mental state. What there is a stream of reactive mental states. And in the context of meditation, reactive mental states are known as hindrances. They're called hindrances because they hinder or they stop the arising of creative mental states. They stop the arising of absorption. So what are we to do about this? That's what I want to talk about here. So what do we do about it? So we're meditating and we notice that we're not able to concentrate, that there's an agitation in the mind, that our concentration's hopping all over the place. The first thing is, in a way, it's just an extension of that awareness, the same awareness that tells us that that's what's happening, that we just open to what's going on. We open to the fact that there might be difficulty or discomfort there. So really what we're doing is we're kind of moving towards what's happening rather than moving away. Our tendency is if something's difficult, as if something's painful in our experience of our mind, we kind of turn away from it. We pretend it's not happening. So we're trying to do the opposite. Part of what we're trying to do in this practice of developing awareness is turn towards what's going on, to open to what's going on, to really kind of get a sense of the texture of what's going on. And what's really important with that is just a sense of kindness. So just doing that in a kind of kindly way and a kind of curious way. A little bit like you were getting to know somebody who you never met before. You're just kind of open to what's going on. So so kindness and curiosity are really key qualities. They'll deepen it. They'll help us deepen our awareness. So the Buddha gives a kind of diagnosis of different kinds of reactive mental states. The Buddha, incidentally, was known in some places as the great physician because he cures the ills of the world. He cures suffering. And he gave a kind of a diagnosis. So if you're a doctor and you're diagnosing an illness, you learn certain patterns that happen, certain patterns of symptoms. And when you recognize those patterns, you're able to diagnose an illness. So the Buddha also basically gave this series of diagnoses, which are recognitions of patterns of ways that we can get into reactive mental states. And he also prescribed, as it were, a number of treatments for these different mental states that arise, these different reactive mental states. It can sound a little bit like, when you talk about this, it sounds a little bit mechanical, but really it's about trying to see what these words that I'm going to introduce you to in a moment are really pointing towards in terms of what's going on in our mind, and also seeing how we can begin to develop and work with them. There's different strategies that you can employ. One of the strategies is cultivating the opposite. So I'll give you some notes. I'll email you some notes at the end of the evening, and they'll have more detail on this. But just for now, I want to share these patterns of reactive mental states, this kind of diagnosis. So hopefully what will happen is you'll recognize these in your own experience. And when you recognize them, you're in a much stronger position to cultivate the opposite, which is what I'll talk about as a response. So if you bear with me a moment, I'll just share a screen. Yeah, so these are the 5 hindrances. So the first one is craving. So craving, particularly craving for sense experience. So this is where you're basically hankering after a pleasurable experience that you're not presently having, which you'd like to have. So this often arises as a response to something that's uncomfortable or boring, or that we want something pleasurable instead. And it's quite natural to do this. In fact, all of these mental states are natural. It's just that they're not, the strategies don't kind of work. So the problem with craving for sense experience is that because we're not having the experience we want to have, there's an inherent and innate frustration in it. So if you're sitting there meditating, hankering after some experience, maybe some experience that you're going to have, that you're not able to have at the moment, like, I don't know, going and get your hair cut seems to be the thing that people are obsessed with at the moment. Or something like that. It might be meeting a particular person. It might be eating a particular kind of food. So as you're sitting there meditating, you're basically fantasizing about these things, or there's lots of different things, and you're not able to give yourself fully to the experience of the meditation because there's this kind of hankering. And it's really interesting just to notice how we can really believe, usually underneath these hindrances, there's a view, and the view that sort of lies underneath, as it were, this hindrance of craving for sense experience, is that when we get that experience, it really will solve all of our problems. We actually think like that. When we go away on holiday, it will solve all of our problems. So we start kind of craving for it. Usually it's something in the future, and that will solve everything. What we need to try and learn to do is to practice stillness, simplicity, and contentment. So this really corresponds to the 3rd precept. So to try and develop some kind of interest in what's presently happening, to let go of the hankering, and to derive some kind of enjoyment in what we're presently experiencing, what's presently happening in our body, in our mind in particular. So that's how we might cultivate the opposite. There's a lot more that we could say about that, but that's probably just enough for now, just to get the principle. So the opposite of craving for sense experience is cultivating contentment. The second of these hindrances is ill will. So what happens when we do ill will? And I say do ill will because it's not something that happens to us, it's something that we're actively generating. What we tend to do is somebody does something that we don't like, and we kind of we grab hold of it and we carry it with us. It's quite a strange thing to do when you think about it, to have a painful experience and then to kind of hold on to it and have it repeatedly. So when we reflect on something that we don't like, we have a grievance. It's as if we keep returning to it and re-experiencing the pain of it. So this often finds expression in having an argument with somebody in our mind. So there's an argument, maybe quite a heated argument, kind of going on within the confines of our own mind. It's really quite strange, but that's what we do. And what we need to do is, first of all, learn to recognize that there will be difficulty in life. There will be painful experiences. And a lot of what we're trying to do is learn to let go of blaming other people for those, or even blaming ourselves. So just accepting, acknowledging the difficulty of that's happening, and not blaming it on somebody or somebody else. And I'll just finish this little bit, and then I see Kelly, you've raised your hand. I'll just refer to you in a second. I'll just finish this little bit. So the opposite of this is what we learned about last week, which is metta. So metta is where we try and learn to respond to whatever happens with kindness. And particularly the 4th stage of the Metta Bhavana, if you remember, that's the stage where we bring to mind someone we find difficult. that's the stage where we particularly work with this tendency to turn painful experience into ill will. Yeah, so we're trying to not do that. We're trying to just acknowledge the difficulty and the pain without generating aversion or ill will or hatred. So I see there's a question. Okay. Did you have a question, Kelly?
Yes, I actually have a question about the craving station, because I actually have a question about the craving that you said.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's some, can you hear me?
I can, yeah, perfectly, yeah.
Sorry. Because there's some meditations that they say to you to put out things that you want to do, like The Secret and the Law of Attraction and things like that.
Yeah.
And would that go against the craving? How is that different? Like how, I don't understand how is that different, because you're craving for something that,
yeah, well,
I don't know.
yeah, in a way that I suppose in Buddhist meditation, craving, like generating a wish to attain a particular, to possess something is not, that would be an expression of craving. So it's not something that we would advocate in the Buddhist tradition to do that.
All right.
If you see what I mean. I mean, what would, I mean, it's not that there's no sense of a goal, but that's why why the Buddha is so important. The Buddha represents something that you're trying to move towards, and even, having a strong attraction to, but it's in a way, it's not something that you can possess. It's in a way more of a sense of letting go than it is in a sense of acquisition. So this is,
because what I was thinking is I was relating that to the stage where you say you wish well and you wish health and you wish all these kinds of things.
Yeah,
and for me, is that's a kind of craving, like you're wishing health and you wishing.
Yeah. Well, in a way, it is a kind of craving.
Happiness. And I don't know, I see that as a kind of a craving. Yeah.
Yeah, it is in a way. It's like, maybe it'd be safer to call it desire. The transition that you're trying to make in the Metta Bhavana is that rather than just focusing on what you desire and what you want, you're thinking about what other people desire and what they want. So that's the sort of fundamental transformation that you're trying to effect, if you see what I mean. Changing a sort of selfish craving into a desire for the well-being of others as well as yourself.
Right.
So it also begs all kinds of questions about, what can we look forward to as a state of happiness and freedom and enjoyment? So in a sense, what the Buddhist tradition says is that's what's most fundamental in terms of happiness, freedom, and enjoyment is the state of mind that you inhabit, not attaining a particular goal or acquiring a particular possession. So that's why that the emphasis is on developing creative mental states, because they're actually inherently enjoyable. Like if you're in a creative mental state, in a positive mental state, the simplest things can be deeply, deeply satisfying. You don't need a lot of complexity and a lot of different things going on, if you see what I mean. I hope is that clear?
Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. No, that's a good question. Thanks for asking that. Just to say, Miriam, I've got your question there. I'll come back to that later. So I'll just pick up from where I was. So yeah, so the next one of these 5 hindrances is restlessness and disquiet. So restlessness and disquiet is both a physical restlessness, so you can't sit still, you're sort of fidgeting and scratching your head and you can't settle into your meditation posture, and also an emotional kind of agitation. It's like your mind won't settle on anything. Very often this arises, this state, as a result of too much input. It's just that we're overstimulated. There's too much stuff streaming into our mind. So again, that's why we looked at a couple of weeks ago, reducing input. Yeah, so just reducing the amount of stuff that we need to process so that our mind can just be a little bit more still. It can also be, this disquiet can also arise because there's something that we've done that we're not happy about. So there's an element of regret, that we have an uneasy conscience. So this is, it points to the connection between what we do and the kind of mind that we find when we sit down to meditate. So if there's disquiet, it might be that there's something that we need to do outside of our meditation to have an easy conscience, so we can sit with a mind that's still. So it might mean like apologizing to somebody, or paying back a debt, or any number of things like that. So sometimes we need to straighten our life out outside of our meditation in order to make our meditation go deeper. So traditionally, ethics is seen as the foundation for meditation practice, and that's why, because without a clear conscience, we just can't begin to settle in our meditation. It's as if unethical actions disintegrate the mind, they break the mind up, whereas ethical actions help the mind to cohere. So the opposite quality to restlessness and disquiet is, well, first of all, you could say having an ethical sensibility. So developing an ethical sensibility, there's a lot more that can be said about that. And also mindfulness of the body, just actually being grounded, as we say, like feeling the earth element in our body as we do feel the earth element outside of our body. So that's the third hindrance. And then there's stagnation and sleepiness. So typically what that looks like is this. The mind, the mind goes dull and the body kind of slumps and the head drops forward. So what's happening here is there's some kind of blockage in our energy. And it's often connected with our body particularly. So what we've been eating, if we've had a really heavy meal before we meditate, it's likely that we will nod off. Our energy will go kind of dull. Exercise is another. If we've over-exercised, or if we've just been exercising, actually it's likely that we've gone for a run, we might be a little bit agitated, for example, so we might need just a little while to settle down. Sleep is interesting. It might be that we've not got enough sleep. So a lot of people find when they start to meditate that as soon as they start to meditate, they fall asleep. And that can be just a really clear indication that you're not getting enough sleep. It's as if the body realizes that we don't have to do anything, we don't have to be anywhere, and the mind and the body just kind of close down into sleep. So that can be an indication that you're not getting enough sleep. And also can actually be an indication that you're getting too much sleep. So I find that if I sleep too long, when I get up, I'm in this sort of slothful, stagnant, kind of sleepy state. And also this relates really strongly to the fifth precept, the precept about alcohol. So this is often what you'll experience if you do a bit of drinking, and the next day, or even the same day, you might experience sloth and torpor. There'll be kind of stagnation and sleepiness in the mind when you're trying to meditate. So again, the opposite is mindfulness of the body, particularly energy. So if you do find yourself slumping in meditation, it's really good to sort of try and keep your posture upright and open. And you can even open your eyes just to stimulate the mind a little bit. The last one is doubt, as you can see there on the list. I'm just going to stop sharing now. So doubt is not like it's good to have like rational doubts and to ask questions, a little bit like we had a question a minute ago, which is just trying to clarify what I was talking about. So those kinds of doubts that are just a genuine questioning are useful. But what I'm talking about here is doubt where we're not able to make up our mind. We're actually staying in a state of vagueness and indecision. And what's happening here is there's an alienation from our sense of inspiration and purpose. We're confused. We're not clear about what our priorities are. And we just won't make up our mind. So it's quite a painful state to be in, because you can't meditate, but you also can't not meditate. You just kind of end up in the state of prevarication and confusion. So the opposite to that is commitment and clarity. And that's really important. And that's something that you can develop particularly by keeping in contact with other people who are clear, who have got a sense of purpose and can help you clarify your own doubts. So we'll talk about this more next week, about how communication with others helps with our own development of our own mind. Like I say, we'll talk about that much more next week because it's extremely important. So commitment and clarity is the opposite quality to doubt. So there's loads more about all of that material in the notes about working with hindrances and moving towards absorption. So are there any questions actually just before I continue about specifically about what I was just talking about? Okay, so what we'll do then is we'll meditate. So if you want to set yourself up for meditation, we'll do a little bit of it. So first of all, just settling into your posture. So part of the way we still the mind is by keeping the body still. We also simplify our experience by reducing input through the senses. And in these first stages of the practice, we're just looking to intensify awareness. First of all, by paying attention to where we are and our surroundings. Particularly noticing sound. And then developing an awareness of our body. The different parts of our body, the different sensations that arise within our body. So feeling the contact that we're making with what we're sitting on. So the pelvis, the buttocks, the upper legs. Again, we're looking for a curious, kindly kind of awareness that's noticing, that's exploring our experience as it arises moment by moment. What's going on in the knees, in the lower legs, in the feet. what's going on in the belly. Maybe we can feel the movement of our breathing in our belly, in our waist and our lower back. Can we feel what's going on in our chest, the sides of the trunk, the back, the shoulders? Is the movement of our breathing within, the touch of our clothing on our skin on the outside? The arms, the hands. Aware of the shoulders and the neck and the throat. The head and the face. So having a sense of the whole of our body with all its different parts. And we'll get a sense through that awareness of our body of the energy of our body. So do we feel restless? Is there an agitation in the body? Is there a heaviness, a dullness, a sleepiness, a stagnation in the body? Or is there just a kind of an easy, energetic equilibrium in the body? Feeling the energy at the base of the spine, in the belly, the energy in the heart, in the throat, and in the forehead. So being aware, as well as the body, of the mind. So the mind, of course, is not something completely separate. It's that non-physical part of our experience that corresponds with the physical part. So seeing if we can notice the way that our body and the state of our body reflects the state of our mind. The state of our mind is reflected in the state of our body. And notice if we feel contented, if we feel happy to be here, or do we notice a hankering, a searching for some experience, some sense experience that we're not presently enjoying? So in other words, is craving present or is contentment present? And then noticing if there's ill will. So, are we preoccupied with some unpleasant event or communication? Are we holding on to some grievance against the person or people? So is there ill will present, or is there metta present? If there is ill will present, how can we develop kindness towards the situation to let go of that grievance? We're also noticing, again, if there's restlessness and anxiety, restlessness and disquiet in our mind and body, or is there a sense of developing calm and peace and groundedness? So just noticing that in quite a matter-of-fact way. We don't need to give ourselves a hard time about where we are. We're just trying to be aware of where we are. Is there sloth and torpor, stagnation and sleepiness? Or do we feel quite awake and energetic, as it were? What about doubt? Do we have a nagging sense that this isn't really worth engaging with? Or a vagueness and a willingness to commit? Or is there just quite a clear sense of purpose and direction? So, what's going on in your mind? Being curious about a particular character of the mind. And you might know already whether you're in a reactive state, a hindrance, or a creative state, moving towards absorption. So for the next few minutes, we're just going to move into a period of mindfulness of breathing, trying to deepen our practice, our meditation, based on an awareness of where we are in our mind. So paying attention to the sensations as we breathe, returning our attention if we waver. And then just sitting. So letting go of directing your attention and just sit. So we'll have a break in a moment, but I just wanted to, and during the break, if you can text me any questions that you have. So I've already got one question from Miriam about the Metta Bhavana. So particularly if you've got questions about the Metta Bhavana, please do throw them out to me and I'll see if I can respond to them. And I just wanted to let you know about, well, first of all, a couple of things about things that are coming up around the centre. So this Friday night, I'm interviewing a woman called Ratna Vandana, and she's been a Buddhist for a very long time. She got involved with Buddhism in the mid-1970s. Interestingly, before that, she worked for Atlantic Records. She used to hang out with Led Zeppelin and people like that. Anyway, she's now a member of our order and has been since the early 80s. And she's going to talk about her life as a Buddhist. And particularly, she's going to talk about what are known as the Brahma Viharas. So the Brahma Viharas are a series of positive mental states, the first of which is metta. The second is karuna, which is what happens when metta meets suffering. There's mudita, which is what happens when metta meets joy. And the last one is upeksha, which is equanimity, which is a deep okayness with all that's going on around us or within us. So she's going to talk about those mental states and how you bring them into being in your life and practice and meditation. So she's a very, very fascinating woman. I don't know her very well, but I was talking to her the other day and she just had an enormous gravitas as a person. So I'm really looking forward to interviewing her on Friday, and you're all welcome to come to that. If you just look on our website, you'll find the link so you can join the Zoom room. So that's this coming Friday at 7 o'clock. And I also just wanted to mention that Windhorse Publications, which is a publishing house that's kind of the Triratna publishing house, they're giving away a free book every week. And this week they're giving, actually for the next 3 weeks, they're giving away ebooks related to the different meditation practices that we've learned and are going to learn on this course. So there's one called the breath, which is about the mindfulness of breathing. And there's another one called the heart, which will be free the week after next. And there's one called the body, which is about the body and meditating on the body. So yeah, I just wanted to let you know about those books that are free. So if you go on the Windhorse Publications website, you'll be able to find them. I'll include that in the email, the link to that. And sorry, I recognise that the link I put in the email last week was actually the wrong link. So hopefully you found your way to the video if you missed last week's. And one last little thing that I'll mention is that tomorrow morning at 10:30, I'm going to be leading a meditation practice session until 12. So it'll be 10:30 until 12. And we'll mostly be meditating. And I'll say a little bit about meditation. And it's basically for people who've just learned to meditate. So people like yourselves. So everybody's welcome to that. And I'll include the link to that in the email that I'll send out at the end of this evening. So just a few little things just to let you know about before you head off on your break. So it's now 3 minutes past 8, 4 minutes past 8. So let's just come back at 8:15 and we'll pick it up. So again, if you've got any questions, please throw them out to me and we'll see you shortly. Okay, so I received a few questions there, which is great. So the first question is from Miriam. Do you have to select a different set of people each time for the Metta Bhavana? So no, you don't. In fact, it can be quite valuable to choose the same people over a series of days. So particularly with a neutral person, if you keep choosing the same person each day, it's likely that you'll build up a kind of a momentum of interest and friendliness towards them, which is the whole point of the practice. Similarly, with a difficult person, if you bring to mind the same person each day, you can help to let go of those grievances that you hold towards that person. And it can really help with if there's an ongoing conflict or difficulty in your life with another person, that can make a substantial difference in terms of the way that you relate to them. So it can be valuable, yeah, to pick the same people, partly because you don't have to decide every time you sit down. So sometimes you can waste quite a bit of time and energy just trying to decide who to pick. So if you pick the same people, it can minimize that. You also might like to just pick people who are particularly relevant. I mean, I know, particularly at the moment, and it's not so bad now, but there might be people that you'd like to see, but you can't see because of the lockdown measures and so on. So it'd be a really good idea to bring those people to mind in your meditation. That way you feel that you can, well, be with them in a certain kind of a way. So you can really be imaginative with the practice and help and in a way use it to help you with what's going on in your life. Someone said, can the Metta Bhavana help with compassion fatigue or burnout? It probably can. I've not experienced that myself, but I think one thing that can happen with burnout or compassion fatigue, if I understand what you mean by that, is that we forget about ourselves. So we can set up an unhelpful kind of opposition between helping ourselves and helping others. So I think often that's when we get into trouble in our lives, is when we set up an opposition. So we're either doing something for others or we're doing something for ourselves. And I think what Metta Bhavana can help us to realize is that very often what we need to do for ourselves is what we need to do so we can help others, and vice versa. So we're kind of changing the way we think about self and other. We're transforming that, which is part and parcel of what the Metta Bhavana is about. And actually what Buddhist practice is about is changing that relationship that we have with the world that we live in and the other people who share that world. So that's kind of a short answer. Someone said, I've been meditating for many years, but found Metta Bhavana meditation life-changing in a very good way. Well, that's great to hear. So that it does add a completely new dimension to meditation, because it's not just about us. And really our lives are not just about us. And that's one of the big traps we get into, is that we just keep coming back to everything being about us. I'll say more about that in a moment after we meditate, actually, but really that's what causes, according to some Buddhist traditions, that's what causes all of our suffering, is just thinking about ourselves all the time. So when we start changing that way of thinking, we start seeing that our happiness and the happiness of others is entirely connected, is bound up together. We start seeing that more and more deeply when we do this practice. I have trouble keeping focus on a neutral person. My mind just wanders to different people. Any advice? So that's the most common difficulty, actually. That's one of the hardest stages of the practice. And what we're working with there is boredom. So you could say in the second stage, we're working with the tendency to want other people for ourselves. So we want happy friends because they make us happy. So you're trying to wish them happiness for their own sake. In the neutral person stage, you're trying to learn how to develop interest in something that you find either pleasant or painful. So that's the biggest challenge, is trying to develop interest. All you've really got to go on is the fact that the other person is another person. You often don't know many details about that person, so you've got to be quite. You've just got the basic facts of life to go on, like the fact that we've all got a body, the fact that we've all got a mind, that we prefer pleasure to pain, we prefer well-being to illness, and so on. So yeah, it's a matter of really trying to get as vivid a sense of that person as being alive in the same way that you're alive. And the fourth stage, what we're trying to do is overcome the tendency to convert or react to painful experience with hatred. So just learn that difficulty and pain is part of human interaction, and learn not to generate hatred from that. When I do my practice, my distractions are any kind of thoughts coming. Sometimes it is hard to focus, but I still do meditate. Any advice on how to focus more effectively? Well, it's really good to persist. I think we shouldn't underestimate the value of just sitting quietly. Even if our mind is a bit messy, even if it's all over the place, in fact, just sitting quietly and trying to be more focused will benefit us, even if the meditation itself it doesn't feel like very concentrated. So I think that's really important. Just developing the momentum of awareness will be transformative, even if we don't get that absorbed in the meditation practice itself. In a way, I don't have any specific advice other than just to persist with the practice. And in a way, maybe one thing to say is not to take our thoughts quite so seriously. So we often treat our thoughts as if they're reality, but they're really just thoughts. Sometimes they correspond to reality, but not all the time. So I think one of the things we need to do with our thoughts is just not take them quite so seriously, and just learn to let them come and let them go without getting kind of involved with them. A little bit like thinking of them like as a natural phenomenon, like wind. So we've had a bit of wind and a bit of stormy weather recently. So sometimes our mind's a little bit like that, and just thinking, oh, well, the storm will pass, not getting kind of tangled up in the narrative that might be going on with our thoughts. That's just a simple thing to say. Anyway, thanks for the questions. I think that's all the questions. So what we'll do now is we'll meditate. We'll do a period of Metta Bhavana. So if you'd like to set yourselves up, and then in a moment we'll start. And just taking the time that you need to set yourselves up so that you're going to be comfortable for the next period of time. Starting by tuning into the body and noticing just what kind of state you're in, whether there's energy in the body, whether you feel sleepy, whether you feel agitated, whether you feel still and contented. And feeling the breath coursing through your body. And really being sensitive to your body as a mass of sensation. And just notice in your immediate experience how some of your bodily sensations are pleasant and some of them are painful. You might feel well, you might feel off color, you might feel ill. And just notice what that's like. Notice your preference for well-being and pleasure. reflect that that's what you want and that that's natural and good. And actually saying to yourself, may I be well. You're giving voice to your desire for your own well-being. And if well-being arises in your experience, so much the better. Also noticing the state of our mind. We might already notice that we're in a reactive state of mind, a hindrance, which will feel uncomfortable. It'll feel maybe even painful. We might be in a state of happiness, a skillful mental state. Our energy flowing. So when we say, may I be happy, we're desiring that transition from constriction to freedom, from reactivity to creativity. So we say, may I be happy. Also saying to ourselves, may I be free from suffering. So that's a much more thoroughgoing, a much deeper aspiration. The aspiration for awakening itself, an aspiration to fulfill our deepest potential to become an awakened being. So we say, may I be free from suffering. And finally, we say to ourselves, may I grow and develop. So may I move towards well-being, happiness, and freedom. May I grow and develop. And then bring into mind a neutral person, a good friend rather. Bringing them to mind as vividly as you can. And like you, they have a body. And because they have a body, they experience pain and pleasure, illness and well-being. That's the same for them as it is for us. Because they care about themselves in the way that we care about ourselves, we wish them well. We say, may you be well. May you be happy. May you be free from suffering. So wishing that for your friend. May you grow and develop. And then just letting your friend move into the background and re-establishing just an easy, natural awareness of yourself, of your body, of your mind, your heart. So you're just, as it were, resting in yourself. And then bring to mind a neutral person. So again, they have a body like you have a body. So bringing them to mind as vividly as you can with that in mind. and wishing them well also. So saying to that neutral person, may you be well. May you be happy. So you're wishing for them what you wished for yourself. May you be free from suffering. May you grow and develop. And then again, just letting go of that person now, letting them move into the background. And again, just being with yourself as you are. Letting go, relaxing any tension that might have built up in the forehead, in the shoulders, or the belly. And then bring to mind someone that you find difficult. And notice what happens as you do that. Try and stay with whatever discomfort or painful feeling arises without getting into proliferating thoughts about this thing or that thing they said, and so on. So just being with the fact of them being there and what that feels like. And also being aware that they exist from their own side. They're not just your difficult person. They've got a whole life that exists completely independent of our response to them. They share our desire for well-being, happiness, freedom, and growth. And we wish them well. So we say to that person, may you be well. May you be free from suffering. May you be happy. So we're including them in our metta, in our well-wishing also. May you grow and develop for your sake. And then including in your metta yourself, your friend, the neutral person, the difficult person, and trying to have the same attitude of metta towards each person equally. And then including your family. Just allow people to naturally come to mind. Including your friends. So an outward moving attitude, an expansion. Including other people that you come into contact with during your life. So other people whose lives overlap with your life. And trying to get a sense of just being part of the human community. How each member of that community, each human being, wants for their own well-being equally strongly, equally powerfully as everybody else. So we can say, may we all be well and happy and free. May we all grow and develop. And then just sitting. So let go of directing your attention and just sit. So opening your eyes and just bringing the meditation to a close. So we've looked at this course at different aspects of the Buddha, different aspects of his enlightened character, and how we can begin to move towards that character ourselves by practicing certain things. So we've looked at the awareness of the Buddha, how the Buddha was radiantly aware and awake, and how that his name Buddha means awake, and how we ourselves can develop awareness through mindfulness, through practicing things like the mindfulness of breathing and bringing attention to our body and our mind and noticing what goes on within our mind and within our body. So we also see that we can develop awareness of what kind of mental state we're in, whether we're in a reactive or a creative mental state. What we learned about last week was the love aspect, you could say, of the Buddha's awakened personality, how he had this deep sense of resonance and solidarity of his life with other lives, and how we ourselves can begin to move towards that kind of experience by doing the Metta Bhavana, by really actively and consciously developing that solidarity of our life with other lives. So the Buddha is also said to be wise. And the particular way that's expressed in the tradition is that he sees things as they really are. So the Buddha sees things as they really are. He knows things as they really are. So he's able to live in harmony with the way things really are. So in other words, he doesn't resist change in the way that we do. He sees it happen. Because he sees it happen, he's able to live in harmony with it. So what we need to do if we need to develop wisdom is to reflect on change. And the particular area where that gets quite challenging is we realize that there's nothing fixed within us. So we tend to talk and we tend to think as if change is something that happens to us, as if in some sense, some part of us stays the same. So, we say, well, I don't know, before this lockdown, I used to be quite a happy person, but then I got a little bit down, as if there's some part of us which was happy and then it was down, but really there's just a whole series of experiences happening one after another. If we keep doing a particular thing, we start thinking of that as ourself. We start identifying with that as ourself. But really, according to the Buddha's teaching, we don't have a fixed self in that sense. It's just that because we keep doing ourselves, so to speak, in the same way, we think there's something unchanged within us. But the Buddha is saying that's actually not like that. So we don't have a fixed self. What we have is we have a new self. We always have a new self. Every moment we have a new self. And that's what makes transformation possible, and what makes a radical transformation possible. So if we're in a reactive mode, the new self is pretty much like the old one. If you remember, reactive mind is mechanical, it's repetitive. And again, we assume that there's something fixed within that there's something fixed and unchanging. If we're in a creative mode, we are more responsive to the flow of life around us and in us. And we're more responsive to the fact that life is a flow. And this is a complete turning about in the way that we see things. So on the basis of a creative mind, we can start developing insight, wisdom, a true seeing, a clear vision of the dynamic, the inherent dynamic nature of all of life. So if we're able to see the change, like I say, we're able to respond. And that, according to the Buddhist tradition, is a liberating thing. You might have already noticed that on the course, just a sense or a taste or a feeling of freedom, which of course is what we're wishing in the Metta Bhavana, when we say, may you be free from suffering. We're wishing the person freedom. And it's that freedom that comes when we no longer resist the change that's going on around us and within us. So that change needs to be based, that insight needs to arise on the basis of a mind that is harmonized, that's responsive. So that's why we meditate. And that in turn needs to be based on a life that's ethical, that's straight in the sense of not being complicated ethically, that it's just quite straightforward. And that provides the basis for meditation. So it's when our mind is really still, really attentive, really responsive, that we're able to look really, really closely at what's going on with that idea of change, and then we're able to wake up to it. So this is what insight really is. It's not just an idea, it's a direct, unmediated experience of things as they really are. And we can only attain that, we can only develop that if there's this, like I say, this integration of mind, this responsiveness of mind that we develop through mindfulness practice, through metta, and through an ethical basis for those two things. So one really direct way of working with this, that might sound slightly intellectual. It's not actually. It's about a reorientation of our whole being. And one way we can make that reorientation is by simply being less selfish. This is what the Metta Bhavana is trying to help us to understand. It's an insight when we realize that other people are as real as we are. And so what we do then is we actually move towards other people. We respond towards other people. We're more aware of their needs, and we're more responsive to their needs, and not just thinking about ourselves. So that's in a way the kind of emotional or the attitudinal equivalent to this understanding that I'm talking about of not having a fixed self. When we have that understanding, we'll actually be much more altruistic, much more other regarding, much more unselfish. So the focus for the practice this week is, first of all, meditating every day. I'll just share a screen here. So meditation every day, and alternate the two practices. Do the Metta Bhavana one day, the mindfulness of breathing the next. If you've got more time when you want to, you could do both practices each day. You could do them more than once if you wanted. And the next thing is to write down 5 things that you're grateful for each day. So when we develop a sense of gratitude, we start realizing how much has been given to us. We start realizing that we don't create all the benefits that we receive in our life, that an awful lot of what we have, some people would go so far as to say everything we have has been given to us. So when we start seeing that, we're much more likely to be generous, because it'll just be the kind of natural outflowing of a sense of gratitude. And so it's a really good practice is just to sit down and just reflect on 5 things that you're grateful for, and just write them down on a piece of paper or in a journal or a notebook. You could even draw a picture if you wanted, if you're more of an artistic kind of bent in that way. And it doesn't have to be anything enormous. It doesn't have to be, life itself. It could just be the fact that you're appreciative that it didn't rain, or that you went for a nice swim in the ocean. Or you might be appreciative of the fact that you're able to see your friends again. So I was able to see a couple of friends who I hadn't seen for 3 months over the weekend. And it was just really, really lovely to see them. So I felt really grateful. So if I was doing this practice, I could have written down that as one of my 5 things. So it doesn't have to be an enormous thing. It might be. But it's just getting into the habit of being appreciative. And this is a really good way of developing that. And the other thing to practice this week is to do one thing for others each day that you wouldn't normally do. So we probably do quite a bit for other people. If we live with them, we might kind of wash up and tidy up and, I don't know, rinse out the basin after we've had a shave, or I don't know what it might be. But actually try and do something each day this week that you wouldn't normally do. It's sort of an extra thing. It might be for somebody that you know, or it might be for a stranger. It might be picking up a bit of litter on the canal or at the beach or something like that. So those are the 3 things this week. So to meditate every day, alternate the 2 practices, to write down 5 things you are grateful for each day, and to do one thing for others each day that you wouldn't normally do. So what we're doing here is we're practicing the second precept, the precept of generosity, or undertaking to abstain from taking the not given, that we heard about last week. So, yeah, just actually, while we're on the subject of generosity, I mean, that kind of principle of generosity is a big part. It's really the reason why we try and do things here for free. So we just decided at this time, in this coronavirus time, just to offer all of our offerings, all of our classes and courses for free, all of our drop-in meditations for free, because we just wanted to express that principle in a really uncompromising way. So yes, I just invite you, if you wish, to support the work that the Dublin Buddhist Centre does by giving us a donation. If you want to help us more than that by giving a one-off donation, you can take out a regular standing order. So particularly at this time, the really uncertain thing is like what our income is going to be each month, like what it's going to be in 3 months or 4 months or 5 months or this time next year. So if we have standing orders, people giving regular monthly donations, it makes a really big difference to just our sort of financial planning and a sense of confidence going forward into the future. So if you want to support the Dublin Buddhist Centre and the work that we do, that you can give a one-off donation, or if you want to, the best way you can support us and what we're doing is by giving a standing order. So again, you can I've put the link on the chat box. It's also in the email that I'll send you. And that's it, basically. So I'll look forward to seeing you next Tuesday, which will be the last evening of this course.